Hello, everyone. We're just getting things set up here. I apologize for the delay, but I want to open this on Zoom as well, so people can participate uh, and and contribute, but with some comments and questions. So, sorry, just give me 1 second, and I'll get this going. Thanks for joining. Set up here. I apologize for the delay. Zoom as well, so people can participate and contribute, but with some comments and questions. So, sorry, just give me 1 second and get this. Thanks for joining. Okay, thank you. I apologize for the delay, but here we are, and I'd like to welcome everybody to our meeting online. And just to let everyone know, we are also on Zoom. So if you'd like to join our Zoom chat, go ahead and then you can share some thoughts, some questions, and we've got some people coming in already. Thank you, Sonia, for joining us. And we chose to do this online today because of the frigid temperatures that we have outside. So thank you all for joining us here today. So we usually start with a little text to harmonize ourselves, then a prayer, and then we'll jump into our talk. And because we're doing this in Zoom, I'll share my screen, and you'll be able to see the PowerPoint presentation, and then with us tucked in on the side. So to start off, let's pick a text from the book called Living Spring by Chico Xavier, Through the Spirit Emmanuel. And the text that we're going to read today is called Differences, and it's chapter 63. And it brings a passage from Jesus when he says, "By this all will know that you are my disciple, if you love one another." And Emmanuel brings the reflection that in many denominations of Christianity, there are thousands of people who are attached to their master and Lord in some manner. There are hearts that outdo themselves in their praise for the great physician, exalting him for his divine intercession in matters in which they realize they were benefited. But they do not go beyond making spectacular claims, as if they were living forever immersed in wonderful visions. They are simply beneficiaries and dreamers. There are ardent temperaments that speak impressively from the pulpit when giving erudite and emotion-packed sermons, in which they expound the role of the great renewer in religion, philosophy, and history. Yet they do not go beyond these invaluable speeches. They're priests and preachers, nothing more. There are brilliant minds that pour forth sublime pages of consoling faith, causing tears of emotion to flow from readers avid for revelatory knowledge. Even so, they do not go beyond the arena of religion erudition. They are but writers and intellectuals. These all have their special abilities and merits. On the other hand, there is a different kind of collaborator regarding the work of the good news. Such individuals praise the Lord with their thoughts, words, and actions every single day. Yes, they do spread the treasure of the good through consoling words whenever possible. They do pen edifying concepts about the gospel every time the circumstances allow it. However, they go beyond spoken and written sermons. They act incessantly in the sowing of the good by means of deeds of self-sacrifice and pure love, according to the examples of action that Christ bequeathed to us. They do not ask for compensation on results, nor are they in tune with the evil. They always help and bless. Such persons are recognized as true disciples of the Master by loving. So let's embark on our little prayer, elevating our thoughts into our Master Jesus. And with these words from Emmanuel, inviting us to bring the love of Jesus into our hearts so we can help improve our thoughts, our emotions, and feelings. So each one of us can become impersonation of Christ's love. We ask you here today, Jesus, to help us, to inspire us all, and to open our hearts as we embark on this hour to converse, to talk about self-awareness. Jesus. May your blessed words and your kindness be bestowed upon our hearts today and for the days to come. So be it. Well, thank you, everyone. And as I said, it is great to be here. And we're starting our chat today by talking about self-awareness. And it's a talk that I did about 3 or 4 years ago. And throughout the week, this became a topic that came to mind quite a bit. So we figured we'd talk about it today. And so to start us off, the picture that you see on the screen right now, that should mean and say what self-awareness is all about. It's about looking internally, looking at ourselves, and embarking on this journey of getting to know us, utilizing everything that's around us, as we'll talk. to understand, to comprehend, and to get to know this beautiful person that we all are. And for those listening to us on YouTube, I'm monitoring the chat here. So please make comments, questions, and then we'll be chatting along in this virtual scenario. So when we think about self-awareness, the first thing that sorry. So just to ground ourselves on where this talk came from, give credit where it's due. We have a good friend of FSS, which is the Federation, the Spiritist Federation of the state of Mato Grosso in Brazil. And they put out quite a few nice videos about it. And there were 6 videos about self-awareness, and this is one of them. We've based our talk on that video. It's available on YouTube. And we also took a lot of passages, as you'll see here today, from 2 books from Joana de Angelis. Joana de Angelis is the spirit mentor of a medium called Givaldo Pereira Franco in Brazil, and she's written many books through him, and we'll be bringing 2 of them here today. One is called Spirit Awakening, and the other one is called The Conscious Being. And because this is an online talk, there is quite a bit of text on the PowerPoint. If we were all here, I wouldn't need that much text, but for the online version, I put quite a bit there so you can follow it along. And skip a few slides here. So our purpose, our goal today, as we start this journey on self-awareness, is to talk about what it is, bring the knowledge from what the Spiritist doctrine tells us about self-knowledge, and also understand not only what it is, but also its objective. Why should we even bother talking about it? And as you can see here, our purpose is to reflect about this virtue that self-awareness is. So self-awareness, as we mentioned before, it is a virtue. It is something that we can work towards. It's something that already resides within us as a little seed. We just need to water it. We just need to train it, exercise it, so we can get better at it, and it can become part of our day-to-day lives. And also why it's so important for us in our evolution as immortal spirits. And as far as an initial reflection goes, thinking about, I'll pose a few questions, and you can think about it within yourselves, just to see where everyone is at and to ground us. The first 2 questions that I'd like to bring are, the first is, why learn about self-awareness? And I'd like for all of you to think about it internally. What is the meaning? What's the importance of looking at self-awareness? And then the second question is, have I been practicing it lately? Have I been discovering things about myself that I didn't know? And also, these are just some questions that you guys can pose, and hopefully you can answer it now in your head, and then throughout the talk, you can use these examples that you thought as answers to bring more meaning to what we're going to be talking about here today. Perfect. So we'll be using a lot of passages from the gospel as well. And when we think about the purpose of self-awareness, we'd like to bring something from the gospel. Because when you think about understanding a little bit more of us, the purpose becomes what Alirio, who's the person who created this talk about self-awareness, he wants to bring the idea of literally self-awareness being us putting a mirror in front of us and seeing our reflection, kind of like the picture that we had initially, for us to see our to see ourselves without any masks, without any facades, without any alternate personality, but just to see us for who we truly are. Right? That's the first step in self-awareness, is that reflection. It could be looking ourselves in the mirror and just start to scan internally the things that we are, the good and the bad, right? Everything without any reservations. And John Evangelist talks a lot about this, as we'll see. And when we think about the why, this is when we resort to something that Jesus told us in John chapter 8. He said, you will know the truth, and the truth will set you free. So if we stop there for a minute and think, for us to see, knowing the truth will set us free. This is something that Jesus taught us. Then we might ask ourselves, then, well, what is this truth that Jesus was talking about? What is the truth that he was referring to? And when Alidu describes this truth, he separates it into two, just so it's easier to understand. He talks about our internal truth and the divine truth. I'll start with the divine truth because it's a little easier. The divine truth is made up of all the divine laws that we get to know as we study the gospel, as we study, for example, the Spirit's book. The third part of the Spirit's book talks about, I believe, 11 divine laws, and explains them pretty well, pretty in depth. And so the divine laws are basically these laws that govern our lives. The other one, which is the internal truth, is this exercise that we do of self-awareness to find where we are, to find what is true to us, to find how we behave, to understand how we behave. That's our internal truth. And in doing so, in that process of self-awareness, when we start to combine our internal and our divine truth, we start to see things that might not jive, things that might not be might not be combining, it might not be syncing really well. And that's when we start to relearn our internal truth, to change ourselves, to eventually line up with the divine truth, or line up our behaviors according to the divine laws. And it's a process, as we'll see here today. So let's look at now what Joanna Gengeli says. And again, we'll be having a lot of text. I understand, just to keep that in mind. And in having a lot of text, I hopefully you all can follow what Joanna Gengeli so masterfully has inspired us with in her books called Spirit Awakening and The Conscious Being. So the first one is when she brings us the idea that self-awareness conducts the individual to comprehend how to behave and how to act within the moral codes of ethics and of personal relationships, building their stability. So the goal today is to almost go sentence by sentence of what she's saying and reflect a little bit about it. The first one that we can see here is that she says that self-awareness will conduct us to understand how we behave. Self-awareness is what's going to help us understand why we behave a certain way, understand why sometimes we have a hard time controlling how we behave. We have a hard time understanding why sometimes we might have bursts of talks, of sometimes more forceful dialogues with people, where we just blur a lot of things that might not be as nice, and we feel like we don't have control over. So the self-awareness will conduct us to understand a little bit more how we behave, and it'll help us also guide us on how to act. That's the beauty of it. Not only will it will help us understand how we behave, but it also help us control and more mindfully act. As we'll see on the very second last slide, self-awareness will help us change our behavior from a reactive behavior to a more active behavior. And it's beautifully shown in the book Jesus at Home, which is a book by Sheikh Xavier, Through the Spirit Ne Lusu, where we have multiple chapters of Jesus being at one of his disciples' homes and having a little chat at night. And so in that book, it's beautiful to see that every time someone asks a question to Jesus, he doesn't immediately answer it. They always say that Jesus hears it, listens to it, and takes a little bit of time, and then answers it, which is showing the level of self-awareness that Jesus has, because he's never reacting to something, but he's always taking it in, reflecting upon it, and then acting from a place of groundness, from a place of control, from a place of stability. And so this journey of self-awareness, one of the goals is then to modify our behavior from reactive to more of an active action, if you will. And when we see the last sentence here from Joanna, she says that so self-awareness will teach us how to act within the moral codes of ethics. The moral codes of ethics, what she means here are, for example, the divine laws that we just talked about, and of personal relationships, building their stability. So again, the stability that we just talked about, that we can see so beautifully in Jesus. And it's interesting because Joanna brings the idea of personal relationships and how crucial personal relationships are to self-awareness, because it is those personal relationships that personal relationships will put us in situations where it will require us to act in a certain way. So be it with someone that is testing our patience, right? It's usually on personal relationships that our patience will be tested, right? And in that situation, we'll be able to self-assess, to be more self-aware. How is my patience in that interaction with that person, right? At work, in the family, at home, right? It's these personal relationships that will put ourselves to a test to see how we're behaving, right? And that's where self-awareness can so beautifully be placed for us to learn about ourselves. If we're locked up in a room, not interacting with anyone at all, how will we ever know how we are? How will we ever understand how we are if we're not putting ourselves out there, exposing us to situations to learn more about our own behavior? So, as Joanna mentions, personal relationships are key for that understanding of ourselves. And she says that this achievement shows in the graciousness of movements, in the jovial and joyful conduct, and in the fraternal encounters of considerable emotional surrender. She says that this achievement, the idea of practicing self-awareness more and more as we go, will show itself by the graciousness, by the jovial, by the joyful behaviors that we will start to display, that we will start to feel as we go through it. She says that this becomes almost like an emotional surrender towards the end, where we're surrendering ourselves, our emotions, our feelings to us. We're no longer tailoring our emotions to others, but we're truly connected with ourselves, with the divine laws, in the way that we can be true to our behavior as opposed to be tailoring it to others' expectations. And Alidio, he always likes to bring the idea of the pendulum when we're talking about virtues. And because self-awareness is a virtue, we want to bring that pendulum scenario to help us understand a little bit more of what it is and what happens when we go too far on each side of the pendulum. So the idea of the pendulum, for those of you who haven't heard this before here, is every time we talk about a virtue, the virtue is always the balanced feeling, the balanced behavior. Whereas we know that we have extremes, extremes from both sides, and then the balanced in the middle. And it always says that one extreme is the too much, one extreme is the too little, and then the middle ground is the balanced. So here we'll put self-awareness on the scale and see what happens when it's too much, what happens when it's too little, and then what happens in the center when we are more balanced. So the first one on the extreme side, which we call demand, right? This is when we're trying self-awareness, just too hard. It's just too much, right? And this usually we tend to go that way when we're feeling very anxious, or when we're demanding ourselves to immediately change or immediately be perfect, in a way that for example, as soon as I detect that I'm not being very patient to that person, I will demand myself to immediately have full patience and serenity for that person. And in doing so, we go to this behavior of demanding ourselves to change so instantly, which is not something that is possible. It's not something that is loving to ourselves, because whenever we're demanding a perfection, it means that we don't accept ourselves for who we are today. And this is something we'll talk about extensively. But when we're demanding a change, it means that we don't accept who we are today. And that lack of self-acceptance, can be very detrimental to us. It's a lack of love, something that Jesus was a master at doing in every single encounter that he had. One of the reasons why it was so profound is that he looked the person in the eye and he knew everything about that person. And he still accepts that person for who they were. And he was always motivating them to keep going. He never judged. He always accepted. He never demanded change. He always accepted and then motivated the person to go and improve. But that piece of acceptance, that piece of lack of judgment, was always there. And this is what we can bring to here, right? Jesus was never demanding an immediate perfection, right? The first thing that he would say is reflect and accept, and don't judge, right? And so the demand part is filled with judgment because it wants a change immediately. We can do this to ourselves. We can also do this to others, right? Demanding others to change immediately. And then to keep reading the slide, it says, without going through the gradual improvement path. that the law of progress tells us about. When we have the comprehension of the law of progress that talks about our progress is not only imminent, but it's always present, right? It's something that will always happen because that's why we were made. We were made to progress, but it never demands progress right away. On the contrary, because progress is, we know it's always there because we know it's constant. There is no reason to try and bypass it or jump it or go too hard, because we know that if we do it a little bit of time, but if instead of being forceful, we try to work on our discipline to do it every day or whatever it may be, it will get there, and it'll be a lot more sound and safe than trying to do something immediate. So this is on the demand part. Then we go on the opposite end, which is the negligence. So the negligence would be the complete opposite to a demand, when it's talking about just the complete lack of self-awareness, not trying to do any of it. And Alidu says that this comes from the spiritual unwillingness. So if they don't want to change, right, neglecting the questions of life due to our moral laziness. So here is where we see ourselves as, when talking about morals, we can be pretty lazy, not wanting to work towards improving ourselves, towards changing ourselves. And thus moral laziness is usually produced by the excuses that we use, especially when we're talking about self-awareness. A classic example of this would be, in that interaction with that person, I wasn't patient because she triggered me, because she did something that made me mad. They did something that blew my patience away. Right? So we always blame the other person as the reason to our reaction, never bringing the responsibility of our reactions to ourselves. So that would be the negligence piece, right? It's preventing or giving an explanation to ourselves that we shouldn't even bother with self-awareness because, I'm really good, right? I only get reactive. I only get mad when others trigger me, right? So it's not my fault. It's their fault for triggering me. So that would be the negligence. We can see both. And then right in the middle, right, that's when we have the self-awareness. And Alidu says it comes with the awakening of our conscience. The awakening of our conscience could be the idea of starting the movement of combining ourselves with the divine laws. As we see in the Spirit's book, we know that our conscience houses all the divine laws. Our conscience already knows all the divine laws. So awakening our conscience would be being interested in the divine laws, learning about them, and then using that as a goalpost, using that as a target, a goal, and us driving, and then us working towards it would be this awakening. And then he says, allowing the Spirit to practice discernment through attitudes that love and practice the divine laws with constant efforts, which is what we just talked about. So that would be the virtue of self-awareness. And now, when we think about where to start, right? That was one of the questions we asked. Where do we start, right? And Joanna says that the conscious being shall work on themselves always, starting from the initial point of their psychological reality, with the self-acceptance of how they currently are and improving themselves without stopping. I wish I could write this in my room. It's a beautiful sentence. And it's filled with a lot of love. And that's what I want to focus on. So Joanna is inviting us to start this from, she says, the initial point of our psychological reality. Starting from where? Starting from where we are now. Start the self-awareness journey where we are now. Right now. Right now. We don't need to wait until tomorrow. We can start it right now. And when we start, right, to look at ourselves, to see our behaviors, to understand our behaviors, is very, very, very important, like she says, with the self-acceptance of how we currently are. So as we start to discover things about us, for example, as we start to discover, you know what, I thought I was more patient, but actually I lack quite a bit of patience. Or if I talk about pride, for example, as we start to become more self-aware, we'll see, well, actually, I'm a lot more prideful than I thought I was. I'm a lot more jealous than I thought I was. I envy people a lot more than I thought, right? As we start to discover things and understand a little bit more about ourselves, we'll probably find this. And then Joanna is very adamant in saying that in this journey of self-awareness, of understanding a little bit more about ourselves, self-acceptance is huge. Because she's inviting us not only to, like lift the rug and see everything that's underneath it, but also accepting it. Because self-acceptance is huge in that journey. And after we can accept and love who we are, which, as a matter of fact, is something that Jesus has already shown us. They've already, like I was talking about before, Jesus would always accept us for who we are without any judgment, and then always inviting for an improvement, always giving a lesson, giving some advice, but he'll always at the very start accept and not judge, right? So that's the beautiful importance of self-acceptance, accepting who we are, and then looking at improving ourselves. Thank you, Sonia. I just saw your comments here. I'm just going to read it out loud. It says, we spiritists tend to demand a lot from ourselves. We think that we have to do right away everything that we study. We have 3 levels of learning: mind, heart, and actions. 3 laws involve this process: freedom, not to demand; duty, for the negligence; and work, to practice the virtue. That's beautiful. Thank you, Sonia. And it exactly explains what we're saying here. Just because we know, or just because we learned how we should do something, it doesn't mean that we're going to immediately get it, right? It takes some time to learn, right? And when we're talking about changing ourselves, like Sonia alluded to, the change happens in 3 ways, right? First, it happens in our minds, which is us understanding. Then it happens in our hearts, which is us making sense of that change, making sense that change needs to happen. And then the third one, that would be through our actions. That would be the change itself when it finally happened. So you can see that it's a process, right? Whenever we try to make it faster or skip a step, probably won't work. So, oops, there you go. And then Rana says that the lucidity is only achieved by those who self-analyze, willing to find themselves with no masks and no deterioration. So again, this is a beautiful invitation, because Joanna is saying this lucidity, the lucidity being like the clear vision, the clear understanding. It's only achieved by those who self-analyze, who practice the self-awareness, willing to find themselves with no masks, right? So taking away any judgment, taking away any masks, taking away any excuses, but just seeing us for who we truly are. And why is that so important? I always like the analogy of a map. So I apologize because I use this analogy quite often, so if you've heard it before, bear with me. But basically, if you are, let's say you're traveling and you're in the middle of downtown New York, for example, and you're lost, and you see just on the sidewalk a little map, right? They have those sometimes, a map of the neighborhood. And then you have the station, for example, you want to get to a park. So when you look at the map, the first thing you do is you look at where the park is and you find it, right? That's your destination. What is the second thing that you do? You usually look for that little circle or that little dot that says where you are. Because when we know where you are and where you want to go, then you can trace the journey. Then you can establish the journey and move forward. And this is the piece that Joanna is talking about, is that finding where we are. This is our internal truth. The divine laws, the divine truth, for example, trying to model the behavior that Jesus, for example, had. That is, to most of us, the destination, right? So when you open Google Maps, when you open Uber, the first thing you type in there is the destination where you want to go, right? So would be, let's say, the divine laws or modeling a behavior of Christ, right? So we know that we're studying that. We're trying to understand what that is. Then the next thing that we do on Uber or Google Maps or wherever map software you use is to show your location, right? So we can establish the journey. So our location, that's what we're talking about here today, is that self-awareness. Now, when I'm not lucid, like Joanna is talking about today, and I'm practicing that self-awareness with judgment, with excuses, my location in my map is not going to be my true location. That's like, when you open Google Maps and sometimes it doesn't know where you are a little bit, and then your location becomes this huge circle. And that's when we're doing self-awareness without our self-acceptance and without the fear of what we're going to find. Right? Because when we place ourselves in the wrong location, when we don't know where we are, we can't trace that journey in a direct way. We got so Sonia says that I believe that Joanna is inviting us to look at ourselves with truth and love, no masks, with truth and deterioration, no judgment. Thank you, Sonia. Yes, absolutely. No judgment is key as well, right? Because as soon as we take our mask off, and let's say we find what we just talked about, we find us being a lot more prideful than I thought we were, we might immediately go into judgment and shut ourselves off, right? So as Joanna is saying, no deterioration, no judgment. And she'll actually talk a little bit more about this in the slides to come. They say right there, for this, they do not self-judge or justify. They do not accuse and they do not guilt. If only it was that easy, right? So in this journey of self-awareness, right, she's saying that the lucid ones, the ones that are doing it properly, they don't self-judge. They don't justify their actions. Justifying your actions would be finding excuses to justify what we did. They do not accuse themselves of what we did in the past, and we do not guilt ourselves for what we did, right? The past is the past. The present, as we're going through this journey, is our opportunity to write a new future. So in doing this self-awareness piece, let's be mindful of any self-judgment, any justification, any accusation, or any guilt that we might imply to ourselves. And then she says, beautifully, she says, they simply discover themselves. Right? That sentence was amazing. Because Personally, I love traveling. I love discovering new places, discovering new cultures, discovering new people. But honestly, the best journey that I guess I can think of, the best discovery that we can do is of ourselves. Because that's the discovery that we can truly do whenever we're trying to discover someone else. That's through our lenses, right? It's never the person. But our own self-discovery, that's the only one that we can do it so truthfully, because we can control our masks, we can take them off and see ourselves for who we truly are, right? Actually go through a true discovery. And Anakahachi, she always likes to bring that analogy of an onion when we're going through our self-awareness, right? It's the onion, as you know, has many layers, right? You're peeling one off and then you peel another one and then you peel another one. So the discovery is there. It's endless. Don't worry. We're not going to stop discovering ourselves. We're not going to run out of things to discover, right? We can always find something new. We can always go a little bit deeper. And so this discovery, I'd say, is the most beautiful and fulfilling one that we can do. So the next one is also Joanna talking about now. She's going to shift gears a little bit, and I'm not going to spend too much time here because we only have 8 minutes, but she shifts gears now and she's talking a little bit more now about a little bit more about pain. And let's reading it. Let's read it so we can understand. She says that ignoring the situation doesn't mean to eliminate or overcome it. Such behavior allows it to grow until the point when they become unbearable, calling attention to be faced. So one of the things that we can do when we're in this journey of self-awareness is the minute we start to see something in ourselves that we don't like, we simply ignore it, right? We give reasons to ourselves. Oh, I don't have time for that, or that's not important, and we create a bit of an excuse and ignore it, right? Or don't give it enough importance. And a lot of times in the beginning, it's very small, right? For example, when you say bad words to someone, or you express that rage, right? But in spurts, right? In small little events. And then you might think, oh, it's just a small thing. It doesn't really matter. It wasn't that important. But what she's talking about here is that the more we ignore it, the more that builds on. Because we're actually not ignoring it. We're trying to practice some indifference, but that it's still there, right? That it's still basically that act of, let's say, of rage, for example. That act of rage hasn't gone away. It's just there blinking. Hey, deal with me. Hey, look at me. Deal with me. And the more we don't, the more we ignore, the more it'll pile on, just like a pressure cook, which eventually will burst, right? And depending on how long we've kept this going, it might burst into a whole, raging attack, or it might burst a little bit, right? And in a few rage moments that we might have, that we might not be able to control it. All of a sudden someone triggers us and we just have this very rageful event that we seem that we can't control it. And it always seems like it happened out of nowhere. And the truth is, it didn't happen out of nowhere. It's been happening for a while. We just have been ignoring it. So if we ever experience this and we ever want to control this is what Joanna's talking about. Self-awareness. It's the self-awareness that will help us understand why it happens and help us to tailor and to control that behavior and change it so it doesn't happen anymore. And all it's doing, it's calling the attention to be faced. That rage is simply just calling ourselves, hey, look at me. I need to be dealt with. I want some love. And so it's a simple calling for attention. She says that such psychological conflicts are present in men which invariably ignore them in order not to face them, which would require them analyzing their own fragility in a way of finding the resources necessary to dilute them. So this is basically describing the importance of not ignoring, of facing our events, facing our behaviors. And when they say analyzing our own fragility, be humble enough to see ourselves for who we are, and then look at what we need to change it. And all it's doing. And then she goes on to say, come on. She goes on to say, deeply rooted, they show themselves in the conscience, in different disguises, in inferiority complexes, in narcissism, in aggressiveness, in guilt, in shyness, in a serious state of alienation. So there it is, right? The more we ignore the self-awareness, the more that we ignore dealing with our feelings, the more we ignore dealing with our behaviors, understanding them, accepting them, and working towards a change, right? They're going to become more and more and more deeply rooted, and they will always show themselves. And then this is what she's saying here. They will show themselves in different disguises. So in inferiority complexes, why would we have an inferiority complex? Why would we have narcissistic behaviors, aggressiveness, guilt, shyness, right? To the point that it modifies our behavior. Well, it's because we've been ignoring small acts of those behaviors. We've been ignoring it so much that now it's almost like installed in ourselves, and then that is driving a little bit of our behavior now, right? So they're all showing themselves. The more we ignore it, the more they'll show it. These ones that she chose, she probably chose these because they are quite common in our society. I'm sure every one of us can identify ourselves in at least one of them, if not all. But again, she's just showing us that is the result of ignoring ourselves, ignoring the act, ignoring the perseverance and the dedication towards our own self-awareness. Perfect. So I'm gonna skip a few slides here because we started a bit late. And I just want to end with this one here. Now Joanna is talking about the end, if you will. She's not the end of evolvement, but once we start to implement self-awareness in our lives, doesn't mean that we're masters of it, but we start to work towards that. She says that the mature being trusts and works towards established goals for their own well-being. They invest in the now, trusting in future results. Knows that every development requires time and opportunity. And it's beautiful to see her because she's talking about investing in the now, knowing that things require time and opportunity. So you can see that we're no longer demanding ourselves to change right now. We're no longer being dependent on the evaluation of others towards us. We're more self-aware. And then she says, this is really nice. She says at the end, I thought it was really interesting when she said emotionally stable. Those do not exalt with success or depress with failure. They simply convert the lesson as wisdom for future endeavors. So I'm going to spend just a couple minutes talking about this one because it's really, really beautiful. She says that the mature being, so the being that is in this journey of self-awareness, it has, uncovered a lot of those behaviors or feelings that we've been ignoring for so long. It doesn't care anymore what they'll find, but they want to find it within themselves. That creates someone who's maturely evolved with their emotions, with their morals. And this leads to an emotional stability. And she's saying that the emotional stability is the one where we're not exalting ourselves or depressing ourselves based on events that happen the outside. So when a success happens or when a failure happens, our mood doesn't change as drastically. Right now, for those of us who are not mature beings, right? If there's a success that happens, we exalt. If there's a failure, we crash, right? And what she's saying is that the emotionally stable is so stable, is so self-sufficient in themselves that the successes and the failures don't inflict much their moods, in the sense that their mood, their emotions are more constant. And this is what we usually talk about, that inner peace, right? When our emotions are more stable, we start to finding peace. And because it is stable, no matter what happens around us, we can maintain that inner peace inside. And that's the stability that she talks about. And in the end, she says, well, we convert anything that happens, be it a success or a failure, into a lesson, right? Into wisdom for future endeavors. So we're never afflicted by those successes or failures, but we see them all as a lesson to learn and to improve. So it brings us no surprise. It brings us no reason to exalt our emotions. So I'll stop here. I had more slides, but I'll leave it for another day. I wanted to thank everyone for participating, for joining us on YouTube, for joining us on Zoom as well. Thank you all. And hopefully, next Sunday, we will be here in person. Temperatures are supposed to climb. So hopefully you're all staying safe at home, and we will end in a little prayer. Oh, before that, sorry, Sonia made a comment here. A virtue that I believe helps us to get to this emotional stability is the apprentice feeling, along with humbleness and meekness. Absolutely. Thank you, Sonia. Those are very important virtues to bring us to this stability, as we'll see. So if we were to end in a prayer, closing our eyes and inviting our Master Jesus to help us in our journey of self-awareness, to help us accept us as a starting point, just like he does, just like he did when he was here incarnated. We ask you, Jesus, that we can surround ourselves with love, surround ourselves with peace, and then in the journey of self-awareness, we can do it with kindness, with the feeling of apprentice, of meekness, humility. So your love, Master, might be grown and constructed and built within ourselves to the world. May you bless us today and for the days to come. So be it. to help. Great, thank you all, and I expect to see, hopefully, we'll see you all here in person next Sunday. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Victor. Have a good day.
Thanks, Ania. You too.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye.